really want to take an opportunity to thank this panel for allowing me to share my thoughts regarding Eustachian tuboplasty or Eustachian balloon dilatation this afternoon. I personally have a lot of deep ties to the Carolinas. I was born in Columbia, South Carolina, just a few years back. And although my father was in the military and we lived in about 8 states in Germany, we spent our summers in Kingstree, a little town called Kingstree, South Carolina, where I learned to work on the farm and hand tobacco. And as I told my kids, I learned how to really work. So college was something I looked forward to. I attended Davidson College and then UNC School of Medicine, and then went out to Stanford for my residency. And then I did a fellowship at the House Ear Clinic, and had the great fortune to be trained by Bill House, one of the real pioneers in cochlear implant surgery. I was then recruited at Duke to head up their otology and neurotology department. I did that for about 6 years, and then left and set up my own practice in Raleigh of the Carolina Ear and Hearing Clinic and the Carolina Ear Research Institute. And although my primary practice is in Raleigh, about 10 years ago I was asked to set up a cochlear implant program in Greenville, South Carolina, and I still go out there once a month and see patients on Wednesdays and operate on Thursdays and Fridays. And many of those patients are Medicare patients. And when I heard this came up for discussion, I closed my clinic down on Monday to come out here because I think it's such an important issue for all patients, but particularly for our Medicare patients. I also wanted to basically review a little bit about the anatomy and physiology, so we will make sure we're on the same page with respect to balloon dilation of the Eustachian tube. As we all know, the sound enters the ear canal, vibrating the eardrum and the 3 ossicles, allowing us to hear, and critical to that process is having air in the middle ear space. And as we all know, this is really due to the Eustachian tube, which opens and closes during swallowing. Dr. Poe has a nice video, a slow motion video showing exactly what goes on. This is a left Eustachian tube, and I know it's a little light here with the background ambient light, but you can see when someone's swallowing, and look in this area here. This is the critical area. This is the cartilaginous portion of the Eustachian tube. This is where that valve is, and it's this valve that allows that air now to equalize behind the eardrum. So theoretically, the pressure in your ear canal is the same as the pressure in the middle ear space. So again, critical aspects. So this is that cartilaginous portion of the Eustachian tube. And previous to this balloon dilation of the Eustachian tube, we had nothing. We basically, either patients would have to live with the problem or would have to put a ventilation tube in. They couldn't have water activities, and so forth. So when the Eustachian tube doesn't work, we get otitis media with effusion or otitis media, or we get a retraction, and sometimes this can lead to a cholesteatoma requiring surgery. And again, I mention these things because if we don't take care of the underlying problem, we're going to have to take care of the consequences of that problem, which is going to increase surgery time and cost and so forth to the patients with surgery and repeat clinic visits. With the Eustachian tube balloon dilation system, we basically use a scope to look down the ear, and these can be done under local or general anesthesia. And then we'll take a catheter and put down the nose and basically catheterize the Eustachian tube orifice. And this is a video showing this procedure being done. This is your Eustachian tube, and then we'll come back out. So now we're coming down through the nose, and we're getting back. Here's the catheter. And then we'll find the orifice for the Eustachian tube, as seen here. And basically what we'll do now is insert the end of this catheter here into the Eustachian tube. And we'll do it until this little yellow marker comes out. At that point, we'll put some saline into the balloon that will actually dilate that balloon in there. And we do about 12 atmospheres of pressure and just leave it for approximately 2 minutes. So once this is completed, you're going to see the balloon being deflated and then retracted back into the guide catheter. And then this is removed from the nose and the procedure is completed. Now the natural question is, why does this work? And is it a short-term or is it a long-term fix? And through studies, taking basically biopsies of the mucosa, if you think about the adenoid tissue on a child or tonsil tissue, sometimes you get hypertrophic lymphatic elements in here. And you can see these in these patients that have eustachian tube dysfunctions. All this is lymphoid tissue. This is right after dilatation. And what it does is it crushes that lymphoid tissue. And the beauty of this, the reason it doesn't just work on a short-term basis, but a long-term basis, is a higher magnification, but all those lymph cells are gone. So you're basically doing an atraumatic adenoidectomy, so to speak, or removing that lymphoid tissue from the eustachian tube. So we did a study on this, and I was involved in this study a few years back, and actually I've been in studies with sponsored by the FDA in the past, and I've never been in a study where the FDA stopped the study because the results were so overwhelmingly positive. And that's what happened in this situation. Now, speaking specifically to my Medicare patients, if you look at ear problems or hearing loss after the age of 60, about 30% of those, 33%, have hearing impairment requiring a hearing aid. The only other option to this that I have is basically putting a tube in the ear. If you put a ventilation tube in the ear, plug up the ear so you get no ventilation or aeration to the ear in a dark, damp space, you end up getting infections. And these patients come into the office repeatedly. And so you just drive up your cost. And I'll tell you, these patients are frustrated when they have eustachian tube dysfunction, especially if they've had normal ear function earlier in their life. And it really prevents them from doing activities. You know, we like to think, and I think it's true, that the 65-year-old is not the equivalent of the 65-year-old in the past. They're vigorous, they want to scuba dive, they want to do other activities. And to me, to deprive these patients of this type of technology where we know it really works is not really in their best interest. As I mentioned in my introduction, I was trained by Bill House, founder of really the pioneer of cochlear implants. And I remember early on when he was working on cochlear implants, everyone was against him. Not just the government, FDA tried to shut him down. Even his colleagues would talk against him at meetings. And one day I said, Bill, how did you keep going when everybody's against you? You know, it's pretty tough. And he said, John, I always listened to my patients. As long as I was doing right by my patients, I kept going. And as history will show, where would we be without cochlear implantation? I think this is a very innovative technology that addresses the underlying problem as opposed to the symptoms. And if we aren't able to provide this to our patients, I think we're doing a great disservice to them. Thank you very much.